do everything we can to be there for them when they need us. Plus, you could save hundreds when you switch, up to $423. Call 1-888-792-3456 today. Liberty Mutual Insurance. Responsibility. What's your policy?
Your favorite food's fighting you? Fight back fast with Tums. Calcium-rich Tums starts working so fast you'll forget you had heartburn.
Tums. Doctors trust calcium plus vitamin D to support strong bones. And the brand most recommended by
my doctor, my gynecologist, my pharmacist. Citracal. Citracal.
You trust your doctor. Doctors trust Citracal.
Thanks for disrupting your afternoon, and happy Father's Day. I'm Karen Finney. Let's get started.
Does the president feel that he has violated the privacy of any American?
He does not.
What do you think of Edward Snowden?
I think he's a traitor. Snowden's wrong. He could not possibly have done the things he claimed he was able to do. I have trouble believing that somebody in his position as a contract employee had access to the kind of things he's talking about. The government grants government employees and government contractors clearances. So this is a government issue.
The president welcomes a public debate on these questions because he does say, and he will say again in the days ahead, that we have to find the right balance.
The president of the United States ought to be able to stand up and say, this is a righteous program, it's a good program, it's saving American lives, and I support it.
Authorized by Congress, overseen by Congress, briefed aggressively to every member of Congress.
What I'm asking is, what do you make of the president suggesting, well, I had to scrub up with these guys left?
I don't pay a lot of attention, frankly, to what Barack Obama says. I'm obviously not a fan of the incumbent president.
Hey there, we've got a lot happening this afternoon. The president is just a few hours away from boarding Air Force One en route to the G8 meeting in Northern Ireland, where we know he's going to face some tough questions, both on his plans for Syria, as well as the firestorm surrounding the NSA scandal. Anybody who's been watching this morning knows that this president is actually now playing defense on both issues, which could threaten his efforts to gain support from those G8 leaders for his plans in Syria. Christina Bellantoni is politics editor for the PBS NewsHour. Heather Hurlburt is executive director of the National Security Network, and Jim Michaels is the military reporter for USA Today. Thanks to you all for spending some time with us this afternoon. Christina, I want to start with you because one of the things that struck me this morning was it seemed like the White House Chief of Staff was trying to sort of lay the groundwork for the president in advance of what we know is probably going to be some tough discussions that he's going to have with these other leaders who have lots of questions about the NSA. So it seems like McDonough was out there. We heard him say a number of times that the president's going to be addressing this issue and that Congress was briefed. They were fully briefed. But it felt a little defensive to me. What was your take?
Well, the White House is on the defensive right now about this, but what's really important to point out, and what the president has been pointing out continuously, is that Congress did approve this program. And so it's about how broad it is and how much the American people are paying attention and how much they really get bothered when it's sites that they use all the time, like Facebook or, Google, and feeling like their own privacy is being violated. And so that's why you're seeing a little bit more specifics come out, from the government trying to get these stories in newspapers right now, and from the White House actually aggressively saying, look, we were able to stop terrorist attacks, because of some of this information.
All right. Jim, it was sort of interesting that, we had sort of a little bit of a reversal of fortune and sort of some odd bedfellows today, because you had even Cheney kind of defending the program, and you had other Republicans defending the program as Democrats who've been continuing to, be skeptical, if you will. What kind of position does that put the president in, though? Again, he's headed to Europe. A lot of these leaders have a lot of questions. We still have a lot of questions for the president.
Sure. I think, it's interesting because even the head of the NSA has said now he wants to declassify as much as he possibly can. And I think what the administration's doing in coming days and coming weeks is trying to convince the American public that these programs have actually disrupted planned terrorist attacks. And I think that's going to be his strategy moving forward and the most effective strategy for him.
Don't some of these leaders, just as a follow-up, have some questions about whether or not not their citizens within their borders were targeted?
Absolutely, and it's not only that. I mean, but the intelligence agencies coordinate with each other and share information with each other. This goes to a critical element of trust. And if any of these countries worry about this information leaking out and whether the U.S. is a reliable partner, that's going to be a problem. And of course, domestically within their countries,
sure,
there's going to be a lot of concerns over spying.
Absolutely. Heather, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit because we had sort of an interesting sort of back and forth with the former vice president today, talking about the war on terror and whether or not we are still in a war on terror, or is the war on terror over? Let's take a listen.
Lethal, yet less capable al-Qaeda affiliates, threats to diplomatic facilities and businesses abroad, homegrown extremists. This is the future of terrorism. As we shape our response, we have to recognize that the scale of this threat closely resembles the types of attacks we faced before 9/11.
Well, first of all, he's wrong. It's not winding down. I mean, if you look at the part of the world now that's available as safe harbor sanctuary for terrorists to plan and train and launch attacks against the United States, it now runs all across North Africa. All those places that for example, the Muslim Brotherhood have come to power. So the threat's bigger than ever.
You know, Heather, what struck me about that response from the vice president, and also when you listen to what the president was talking about, I felt like the president was basically saying, look, this is the new normal. This is the reality, and we have to be prepared to deal with this on a day-to-day basis. That's why we have these NSA programs, for example, versus it felt like during the Bush years, the rationale for the things that they were doing in secret depended on this idea that we had this global war on terror with these unseen foes, if you will, whereas I think we're in a different place right now.
Well, the first thing, about what Cheney said today is that Cheney seems to define any Muslim entity that he doesn't like as a terrorist group. And you can have all kinds of concerns about Muslim Brotherhood governments without saying that they're terrorists, which is an allegation that there's absolutely no support for, particularly in Egypt, also in Tunisia, or saying that, any of the spaces in North Africa where there are concerns, some of them there are concerns about terrorism, some of them there aren't. So the first thing to recognize is that when Dick Cheney says terrorist, he does tend to mean Muslim entity we don't like. The second point, Karen, is as you say, much of the way the Bush administration structured the U.S. response to terrorism was built on the idea that we were at war, and that we could behave and use our armed forces and use our intelligence service. And by the way, the Bush administration was doing some of the things that it's now come out that the Obama administration was doing, right, without getting any kind of court support.
Exactly.
And you can feel right or wrong about it, but at least at some point, when half of their senior justice officials threatened to resign, they did go back and get a warrant. So it is very much this mindset that all Muslim entities we don't like are our entity and that are our enemies, and they can usefully be defined as terrorists. And Obama, very much to his credit, whatever you think of the tactics he's used, has tried to move us into a different frame of thinking about how we relate to the Muslim world.
And right, exactly. The other sort of, again, big issue today, Syria, it seemed like during the shows, everybody was kind of piling on, right? First, it was some amount of satisfaction when the president made the announcement on Thursday. Now, today, for the most part, it's too little too late, and we need a no-fly zone, despite the fact that Putin made it very clear yesterday that Russia does not accept the idea of a no-fly zone. Let's take a listen, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
The question is whether or not they're a day late and a dollar short.
The time is not on our side.
If Assad left tomorrow, in a sense, that would be bad for us.
This will turn out to be one of those cases where the United States will set itself up to be defeated.
They really do have to look at a no-fly zone.
No boots on the ground is sort of everyone's position, including mine.
It seems to me they have a great media strategy. They don't have a great Syrian strategy.
The fact that it's taken this White House and this president so long to get a clear and concise policy on Syria has left left us with the worst possible scenario right now.
All right, I want to pull this apart a little bit. Jim, you know, you spent time in Iraq, and I do think that when a lot of us hear what's going on, it just does not sound realistic, this idea that we won't end up with boots on the ground, that, you know, it may start with weapons, then it's a no-fly zone, then it's a... How do we avoid a quagmire here?
Well, I think one thing to keep in mind is it has taken the administration more than 2 years just to get to this point here. And here's what happened, I think. It's important to take a look at. The rebels started losing momentum. They lost a couple key cities, and the concern was that the momentum would go in Assad's favor. The administration felt they needed to do something.
Right.
They're talking about arms, but here's the problem moving forward. It's not entirely clear that the rebels don't have plenty of small arms and ammunitions. I mean, it's disparate groups with different levels of ammunition and weapons. But the real key now is, how do you turn the tide on the ground without getting into deeper and deeper involvement? This is what they're trying to do, ratchet it up little by little. They're going to need to assess what the rebels need, what kind of key weapons they need, but more importantly, they need to get the rebels, if they want to change the situation on the ground, coordinated, moving in the same direction, and trained so that they can turn the tide.
And actually, Christina, just quickly to that point, it seems like part of, at least now, what the White House is saying is that they've been using this time to try to figure out who's the moderate opposition, get more intel on who it is we should be giving arms to, and actually assess some of the needs that Jim is talking about. That seems to have been their strategy over these last weeks.
Yeah, it is. And in fact, they're saying over and over and over again, and we're consulting with Congress on the best way forward. We're not sure, you know, initially what they said, we're not sure that arming the rebels is the right way forward. And what's interesting in that montage that you showed is it was, I believe, all Republicans or Republican affiliated people. And, you know, you've got a lot of criticism. These are people that are going to be criticizing the president no matter what, really, especially on foreign policy. And a lot of them are the same critics that were criticizing him on the response to the Benghazi attack. But Democrats are very wary about this as well. There's not a lot of appetite in the United States for any sort of conflict, any sort of boots on the ground. And one thing that you're seeing going around quite a bit is a 1993 article showing the United States helping out Osama bin Laden, right? And saying we would like to arm him. He's like the rebel insurgency here. And so the idea that there are consequences down the line, the White House is very aware of, and that's one reason why they're saying they're getting as much information as they can before they make big decisions.
Absolutely, because they know the American people are listening for that. Thanks to Christina Bellantoni, Jim Michaels, and Heather Hurlburt.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next, the IRS scandal. That isn't a scandal. Try as they might, Cheney and Ice's arguments just keep getting disrupted by the facts. Stay with us.
Some guys on their own picking out a political class to